Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. Today we got to cover stage 4 of Valencia and of course Etoile Bessèges. Now Arnaud had put on a show at Etoile Bessèges. We've seen crosswinds, crashes, stage annuls. And then of course today stage 4, it's going to have some drama throughout the stage. When the cameras come on, there's 15, 17 guys up the road, but because of all the windy conditions, the cameras are flashing on and off and we lose the picture for a little bit. And when it comes back, we're left with about 13, 15 riders up front. And in there's EF Education's Nielsen Palace. Now, originally when this break started, he had one teammate, Andre Piccolo, with him when this group started. But now after the cameras come back on, I didn't get to see when Piccolo dropped off, but there's just EF Education's Nielsen Palace in there. And he's in a group of 13, 15 guys at this point in time in the race. We're still about 45 kilometers to go. Talking about a minute 40, minute 50 second gap on the chase group being led behind. Now behind you had 10 guys at least chasing this front group of about 13, 15 riders. And you got major teams back there with Cofidis chasing, Kern Farmers throwing in some efforts, FDJ and Arkea Samsic. Now, Arkea Samsic's going to take over when we get into the next mountain. They're really going to start doing the majority of the chasing back there with a little bit of help from FDJ. Bingold throw in some more help later, but for the most part, they can't do much damage to this front group up there because they got 4 Trek Segafredo riders up there, and one's Mads Pedersen, the ex-Road World Champion. Now he's got Giacomo up there with him. He's got some help in the form of Tom Squinge. And of course they got their GC later that they're riding for here on stage 4 because it's going to be a summit finish with about just under 5 kilometers up to the finish line of today's stage. And they're going to be riding for Mateus Skilmos. Now Skilmos has been riding on form, and we know, of course, EF Education's Palace has been on form because he's already won back in Marseille just a few days ago. So, with those two guys up there, Pavel Sivakov, Ineos, he's up there on GC2, of course, and then Pierre Latour. When I'm looking at this front group and I'm thinking about EF Education's Palace, I'm not thinking I'm going to be too motivated to ride in this group. Remember, if you go back to the field when we're talking about GC favorites back there, really the only guys who have missed this front group that would be a threat possibly of winning here at Etoile Bessèges has got to be Thibaut Pinot. But you know, with Pinot, his form's all over the place. It's early in the season. We haven't seen anything spectacular out of Thibaut Pinot, so he's probably not going to be a threat when we're talking about fighting against EF Education's Nielsen Palace, who, of course, like I said, has already been winning. Now, what I don't like when you're in this group, if you're Palace, okay, it's windy, crazy winds. They've had 70-kilometer-an-hour winds on today's stage. So, of course, you could get into the crosswind sections where you could have Mads Pedersen at the front. He could just leave it with 3 or 4 spaces on his wheel and be driving it and then split off EF Education's Palace and send them out the back. And now he doesn't have any teammates. Of course, if he goes back to the field, he's got teammates back there and they can start a mad chase. But so far, 4 or 5 pro teams back there, 10, 15 guys chasing, haven't been able to put a dent into Mads Pedersen and Trek Segafredo pulling this break up front, with other guys rotating through and even helping out some. Of course, Palace is one of them. That's why I'm bringing it up. I never like leaving my teammates. It's the number 1 rule. You don't leave your leader and you don't leave your team until your teammates are completely done. So when you're in a break like this, it's a dangerous position. Now, everyone will say, probably, Chris, he's in the front group. This is great. There's a benefit to being in the front group. The biggest benefit, of course, is there's been a lot of crashes at Etoile Bessèges, so he can stay a little bit less out of danger by being in this front group. But if you're flat, if you need some calories and you don't have teammates to go back to the car and bring you calories, you got to go back to the car every time and get it yourself. And if we're talking Palace, if he drops back to the car, Mads Pedersen's at the front, Trek Segafredo director says, hey, Palace is back here getting some food. Guys, put it down in the crosswind section right now. Let's get rid of Palace because he's the major threat in this front group. And Palace has got no teammates with him. So, am I impressed that he's in there? Yes. You guys know I love the power of watching Palace and how strong he is. But I don't like this tactical maneuver here being so isolated in this front group with 4 Trek Segafredo riders. And of course, everyone else in this group, especially Total Energies, when we're talking Pierre Latour, would love to throw down and put his teammate on the front and just drive it as hard as he can if there's a chance that Paulus has a flat tire, comes off the road for just a second, possibly misses a left turn like we'd seen in earlier stages when we're talking about Lotto Soudal there. If you miss any turns, if you get a gap, all it takes is the Trek Segafredo director back there saying, Mads, put it down. Let's get rid of EF Education Paulus, and it's over, right? And you only have to go to Valencia to see today's stage 4 at Valencia, where it's a 23-rider group, and Bach Mollema's in that front group for Trek Segafredo. And then, of course, we see our Ensman for Ineos go up the road and 3 riders chasing. And then all of a sudden there's chaos in that front group. I'll get back to Valencia later, but now let's back it back up to Etola Bessèges, because that group of favorites with a bunch of GC favorites and Arnaud Delis in there for Lotto Destiny. Now, Lotto Destiny, why not? Go ahead. You got Brent Van Moor with you. You got one guy to look after you. It's a small group. He could finish top 10 here. He had nothing to lose about being in this front group because he's not going to go up with the peloton all the way up to the top of a 5-kilometer climb. So I like this move from Lotto. Love the move Trek Segafredo here at Bessèges because they got 4 guys. So anything that happens to Skilmos with Mads Pedersen in there, they can look after it. Now, we go into the finish. The peloton can't quite pull back these guys before the final 5-kilometer climb starts. And then we see it's Mads Pedersen on the front blowing this group up. He'll pull off shortly. And then it's Paulus that throws in the first attack. Skilmos directly on his wheel. And then we start seeing a bit of a selection because we got Pierre Latour there. Pavel Sivakov's locked on. And Arnaud Delis, the Lotto Destiny rider who's won 2 stages here and is a sprinter more or less. We're going to have to classify him something different. Maybe this kid's going to start coming into the Wout van Aert kind of style of classification if he could start climbing any bit better than he is right now. But he's latched onto the wheel and he looks fantastic. We're about just under 3 kilometers to go, and EF Education's Paulus going to throw in an attack. We're going to see it's Skilmos that opens up the gap. I thought this was a no-no, but Skilmos, he's got other plans. He's going to play a little bit of tactics back there. He's going to get some help from Pierre Latour, and he's going to get some help from Pavel Sivakov pulling. And then with about 2.5 kilometers to go, Skilmos is going to jump across the 10-second gap to get up there to Paulus. These two will work somewhat pretty good together all the way into about 150 meters to go. And then Skilmos is going to throw an attack going up the left side because he wants to go into the final 75-meter right bend that pitches up super steep up to the line. He gets that into the last right corner that is, accelerates hard, looks over his shoulder, sees he's still got the gap on Paulus EF Education and drives it all the way into the line to win today's stage 4 of Etola Bessèges. EF Education's Paulus is second, same time, but that will put Trek Segafredo into the hot seat for tomorrow's individual time trial as #1 race leader here at Etola Bessèges. Now behind, Latour finishes 3rd on the stage. 4th is Pavel Sivakov, just a few seconds back, but he's about a minute back on general classification, so he won't be able to make up that time and have any chance of winning the overall classification on tomorrow's individual time trial. Now we go a little bit further back on the stage, still top 10. Arnaud Delis, Lotto, he did a fantastic job and crosses the line to stay 5th on the general classification. And you see him with his head down on the bars, just dying. This makes a big old grin right here on my face because I'm a GC guy. When I watch these sprinters come across the line, you know they're tired when they come across the line, but by the time they circle back around, high-fiving all their teammates, they're already relaxed, calm, and ready to get up on the podium. Now, Arnaud Delis gets to see and feel directly what it's like to be a GC guy after today's stage 4 of Etola Bessèges. And he'll have a shot at tomorrow's individual time trial, possibly moving up 1 or 2 spots or possibly losing a spot. We don't know yet, but Arnaud Delis has put on a show here for Lotto and will finish top 10 in the general classification, plus take 2 individual stages here at Etola Bessèges. Now, let's jump over and let's go down south till we go down to Spain for Valencia, because in Valencia, kind of the same tactics are happening, right? 23 riders go up the road. Trek Segafredo only started with 5 guys, but Cicconi's in the race leader's yellow jersey here at Valencia. Now, with the riders up in the group is 23 guys, and the cameras that come on, they're jumping kind of all over the place. I believe they got about a minute thereabout lead, and then our Ensman's going up the road. Now, this is causing a little bit of problem, and this goes back to the Etola Bessèges. Like I was saying, if you're EF Education, now it's a scenario for Trek Segafredo because they put guys in the move up front, but the group up there at 23 guys is so big, this is where the chemistry could get dangerous if you put a guy in there like Bach Mollema, who while he's in this group of 23, he's a threat up there for the general classification, which means you don't have to chase behind. But let's say no other teams chase behind here at Valencia, that gap grows out. Now you got Bach Mollema with one other teammate in there only to help him if there's trouble. So when our Ensman goes up the road, that group finally sits up because there's no chemistry like there was in Etola Bessage. They go back to the peloton, and then, of course, you have all the guys that want to win the general classification right in the front. Of course, it's Bahrain Victorious. It's Bora Hansgrohe. Bora Hansgrohe will drive it into the sprint points, the sprint time bonus just before the climb starts with about 11, 12 kilometers to go. And we'll see Vlasov get second place points here, which will give him a couple more seconds to help him up in the general classification. Got all the commentators on GCN excited, thinking that Bora Hansgrohe's Vlasov, last year's winner in Valencia, is on good form. Now, we still have our Ensman up the road, but we're starting to climb with about 10 kilometers from the finish, and that's when we're going to see Marc Soler from UAE Team Image throw an attack. I don't care much for this attack because the teams are so big in numbers behind. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and the climb's not super hard. But Marc Soler is always aggressive. He'll be the first one to catch our Ensman, and then shortly after that, you'll see Marc Soler look back as he's getting brought back from Bora Hansgrohe. With about 3 kilometers to go is when the stage really gets exciting here in Valencia. And we'll see up up front, it's Bahrain Victorious that really starts single file stringing this field out. Now, as Bahrain Victorious is on the front after they die, all of a sudden with about 1.5 kilometers to go, just maybe 2 kilometers, I'll call it instead, all of a sudden we see it's Ineos on the front, and they're driving it hard, and they're doing a solid tempo to about 1 kilometer to go. Then we see Uno X get on the front with Torsten. Torsten's doing a big job on the front, and as I'm sitting on the couch watching, I'm just thinking, kid, what are you doing? Now, this reminds me of the Lotto days, and that's why I brought the jersey up here, because I was doing GP Emilia at the end of the season, Italian Classics, and I was racing with Cadel Evans. We come in the final climb. I was probably the second or third best climber in that small group of favorites up there, but I had one teammate with Cadel Evans, and what I wanted Cadel Evans to do was just stay back and not pull hard. Difference, basically, he's doing the same thing as the Uno X rider was doing here with 1 kilometer to go. But the reason why is because the Schleck brothers were on super form there. And as we're coming into the finish, when Cadel Evans was throwing down at GP Emilia, and it's about a 15% climb up to the finish, what he was doing, he's hurting me, making the Schleck brothers feel better. And then when they attack, they win the race. I can't follow because I'm putting the hurt from Cadel Evans. And much the same scenario as what's happening here at Valencia. As you see the Uno X rider, Torsten, he's getting on the front because he has his teammate behind Charmeg back there. Now, he thinks he's helping his teammate out, but when I'm sitting on the couch, I don't see it. I think what's happening is Torsten's on the front and he's driving it from 1K all the way to 500 meters 100%, which is stringing out all of the favorites here. Looks impressive on TV, but it's not really helping his teammate that's a little far back there in the group, and now is going to be maximizing his energies out. Imagine if he doesn't, and it could just slow down and have a little bit of a curb-to-curb flow. All of a sudden, his teammate could start attacking and possibly win the stage. Instead, he makes it so hard all the way to 500 meters to go. Now we see Carlos Rodriguez from Ineos. He jumps on the front, and guess who's on his team? It's Theo Gegenhardt. Now, Gegenhardt, a couple stages back, it got relegated from second to the back of that group, but we know he's on form because he put on a stellar show when we went up the first real mountain stage here in Valencia. We're coming into the finish. It's a bit of a chicane. Carlos Rodriguez has got all of the favorites strung out. As we go into about 75 meters to go, all of a sudden when we hit the chicane, we see it's Theo Gegenhardt accelerate, and he's got a gap on everyone, and he runs it into the line to win today's stage 4 of Valencia. Now behind Theo Gegenhardt, it's Thomas Glaug, who does a fantastic ride for Jumbo-Visma. And guess what? Ciccone, race leader's yellow jersey. He was really the only rider that was able to make any real grounds when we saw Carlos Rodriguez do that big acceleration with 500 meters to go, because Ciccone, in the race leader's yellow jersey, like I told you, will come through for a podium position to hold first place on the general classification here at Valencia. Now, Trek Segafredo, wow, what a ride. I didn't actually care much for the tactics of putting teammates into a 23-man group. I like it better to keep everybody with my guys back there. But at the end of the day, at the end of the weekend here on Saturday, all of a sudden, Trek Segafredo, they're leading Etola Bessage with, of course, Matheus Skilmos, who won the individual time trial last year at Luxembourg, and that's all they have to get through tomorrow in order to win the overall classification. And when we look here at Valencia, we're talking about Ciccone. He's got a chance of winning his first overall classification for a stage race, because should be a field sprint on tomorrow's stage. But you got to tune in because there's going to be some time bonuses. Possibility that Ciccone could lose tomorrow's race leader's jersey on the flat finish, but I seriously doubt it, and it looks strongly like Trek Segafredo are going to win on Sunday. Two big of the early season races here in Europe. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I hope you like today's edition and the tacticals, little stuff that I bring to you guys here on Beyond the Covers. I'll see you on the next edition real soon.